Welcome to Two Trick Pony, a twice-monthly podcast where we explore all the ways that people have found and cultivated their second tricks, from florals to fly fishing and everything in between. We're your hosts. I'm Melissa Betters.
And I'm Clara Ma, and we thank you for joining us. Each week, we invite guests onto the show who have broken away from the expectations of their training, education, or CV to find fulfilling hobbies or even entirely new careers.
We take a look at how cultivating a multifaceted self can lead you to community, connection, and confidence.
This week, we're joined by Dr. Alanna Messner-Scholl, a florist and flower farmer who left her previous life as a clinical psychologist to build a local, sustainable wedding floral business in the Philadelphia region. Before we turn to our interview, we wanted to give our listeners a very brief background about the world of wedding flowers.
Humans have used the beauty and fleetingness of flowers in art, literature, and poetry for centuries. They symbolize the passage of time, personal transformation, and, most notably, romantic love.
The U.S. loves flowers. The U.S. is currently the world's largest consumer of cut flowers, buying about 10 million cut flowers every single day. For the most part, though, the flowers sold in the U.S. are not usually grown here. In fact, over 80% of all cut flowers sold in the United States are imported. Colombia, for example, is currently the world's largest producer of carnations. Ecuador is the largest producer of roses, and the Netherlands is the largest producer of tulips and peonies.
These mass-produced flowers are grown in huge greenhouses and are selectively bred to last a long time, since they have to travel a long way before they're sold. Once flowers bloom, they're cut, refrigerated, and flown to their destination countries. They're then transported in refrigerated trucks to wholesale markets, which process and distribute them to flower shops, grocery stores, and floral designers. The whole process, from field to vase, takes about 3 to 5 days.
Today, consumers are increasingly concerned about the sustainability of the flowers that they buy. While imported flowers are potentially cheaper and more predictable in quality, size, and color, they nonetheless produce a massive carbon footprint. Adding up all the energy needed to power massive greenhouses, fly across continents, and power refrigeration systems, a single bouquet of imported flowers has about the same carbon footprint as burning a gallon of gasoline.
That might be why nearly half of engaged couples in 2023 said they were prioritizing sustainability in their wedding planning, up from just 10% who said so in 2010. Instead of imported flowers, couples getting married have turned to silk flowers, dried flowers, or simply having no flowers for their weddings. However, another route is sourcing local flowers.
Buying locally grown flowers has many benefits. Buying local means that flowers don't need to travel as far, nor be refrigerated for as long. Many local growers let the seasons determine what flowers they grow.
This also means that local flowers can include unique varieties unavailable from general wholesalers. They're also more compatible with local landscapes and pollinators, and help support local growers and small businesses.
Since this episode releases on Valentine's Day, we could think of no better person to chat with than a professional wedding florist. Our guest today, Dr. Alanna Messner-Scholl, is a flower farmer from Southeast Pennsylvania and the founder of her very own floral design company, Waverly Flower Co. She also happened to design the wedding flowers for my and Melissa's wedding back in September 2024. Her story is one of a major career pivot and was one of our inspirations for starting this podcast in the first place. We're so excited for you to hear her story.
And with that, let's turn to our interview with Alanna. Welcome, Alanna Messner-Scholl, to Two Trick Pony podcast. We're so excited to have you on today.
Thank you so much, Melissa and Claire. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so for our listeners, can you give a brief introduction of who you are and what we're going to be talking about today?
Sure. So I am a custom-grown wedding florist, farmer florist, really. We grow most of our own flowers in Greater Philadelphia. And before that, I was working as a postdoctoral fellow with clinical psychology.
So Alanna was actually Melissa and my wedding florist, and we loved her work and wanted to bring her on. And so once we found out that she too was a two-trick pony, we really wanted to have her on the show. So Alanna, we're just super excited to have you, and thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to chat with us.
Can you tell us a little bit about your first encounter with wedding florals? How did you get into this? What's that story like?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a tricky one too for me to answer because there wasn't some aha moment or pivotal experience that I had that led me to it. Growing up though, my dad always tended to a big vegetable garden and my mom always planted a lot of landscape flowers around our house. I loved both, but it wasn't a big part of my life growing up. It wasn't something I was particularly passionate about. But when I was in my 20s, ironically, when I was in grad school, one of the ways that I would de-stress would be to garden. And I really loved growing things, especially from seed. I thought it was just so fulfilling. I really loved it. And then when my children were born in 2020 and 2021, it was right as I was finishing up my postdoc. That's when I started getting more and more into growing cut flowers. And I took a sabbatical from after my postdoctoral fellowship. I was hired on as a full-time employee at the hospital where I'd completed my residencies. And I really loved my work there, but I ultimately took a sabbatical because it was really challenging having two children back to back during the pandemic. My daughter had significant respiratory issues, so I took some time at home. And it was really during that first spring at home that I expanded the garden dramatically and started growing more and more cut flowers. It was during also that postpartum period that was kind of a dark and hard time for me that I really found a lot of joy in what I was doing. I never intended to make it a career. It really started out as a passion project of just selling $20 bouquets here and there, but the community was so supportive. And just after a couple of months, we were asked to do our first wedding. It was terrifying in retrospect, but I was feeling unusually confident that day, and I said yes. That first season, we had 4 weddings, and then the following season, we had about 40, so it grew pretty quickly.
Whoa.
Can you talk a little bit more about that experience of taking what was a hobby and becoming professional at it?
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting because I didn't even really realize that it was going from a hobby to a passion project to a relatively legitimate career in front of my own eyes. Sometimes I still am not entirely convinced that's what it is. And it was an interesting transition, especially that first year or two, because I wasn't sure what the future was going to hold. And so when we started getting some of our earliest wedding requests, they were booking, a year and a half typically out. And I had to really consciously think to myself, am I going to absolutely be committed to pursuing this as a career, making sure that I show up at my best for these people who have hired us for the most important day of their lives? Thankfully, I was in a position where I had some flexibility with my schedule at home, with my children, and I really never ultimately, to be honest, looked back too much on my prior career. Even though I loved it at the time, I really feel confident that this is the right place for me to be.
I wanted to ask something that you mentioned. I wanted to follow up on something that you mentioned about not looking back. You have this very extensive training as somebody with a PhD. Are there moments when you look back and look at the career that you left behind, or did you kind of think about the big changes that you were going to make if you were moving away from that, the hospital job?
Yeah, that's a great question. On some level, I think the reason that I maybe don't look back as much as I otherwise would is because I'm so passionate about what I do now, and it's so consuming. And especially being a small business owner, it really eats up so much of my energy that I don't even really have time so much to look back on what things could have been. That said, I did love my job. I loved my coworkers. I loved our clients. When I look back at how confident I felt about my time in that industry, I never really felt like that was what I was meant to be doing. If I'm really honest with myself, and it's something it's tricky to think about. It makes me emotional a little bit thinking about it, but I think even when I was in the throes of graduate school, especially like years 3, 4, 5, where you're in so deep that like you can't get out, I don't know that if I was honest with myself at the time, I'm not sure that that's really where I was supposed to be. I never felt like I was great or excellent at what I did. And while I loved it, I feel much more comfortable in the career that I'm at now.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting thing to bring up because I think, especially with people who have graduate level degrees, there is sort of this sunk cost fallacy that a lot of people fall into that like, well, I've spent all this time, I've spent all this money building up this expertise. I should, quote unquote, stay in this field. And I think what's really interesting about your story is that you made the switch despite having this education. You took the plunge to do something really different that you knew would bring you joy. And I think that's really inspiring.
It's a good point about the sunk cost fallacy. I also, especially those first couple of years, I guess I'm really still in the first couple of years, but the first year or two, I was especially concerned about what people around me would think. And if they thought it would be silly or if I was making the right decision. And one of the things that really surprised me is that everybody very much supported the transition, including my parents, who are both very achievement-oriented, academically focused people. They both supported it with open arms. They never really questioned it, which is kind of incredible looking back. And I think that helped make the transition a lot easier because I was really fortunate to have so much support.
It's great that your parents were really supportive. I think that having that supportive community is really essential for people when they want to make those transitions. And something that you mentioned that really resonated with me, given that both Melissa and I went through like the gauntlet of grad school. The thing that you mentioned that really spoke to me is that, becoming, especially a researcher, it's built in that you're not considered to know everything in the field, right? It's a kind of strange thing, I think, in some ways in academia that we're always considered students of the discipline. And that is a difficult thing to wrap your professional identity around.
I agree. Yeah.
I want you to think a little bit, though, about how, our show is called Two Trick Pony. And we, when we were thinking about you, we thought about your tricks as having this background, this very high, level of training in clinical psych, and your expertise now as a wedding florist. I think what makes you unique also is that you share a lot of tips about gardening, and like my sister, for instance, is a home gardener, and she follows you and uses a lot of your tips on making sure that her growing schedules and things like that make sense. So, what would you say is the connection between these two things?
Absolutely. I have always loved research and science, and that's the part of the wedding floristry industry, and specifically growing our own flowers, that I have gravitated the most towards. My brain just naturally loves the detail-orientedness and the seasonality that's inherent in growing cut flowers. And I think that's true for a lot of aspects of gardening. But with cut flowers specifically, there's such a beautiful rhythm with the seasons that you can really maximize your output, your productivity in the garden if you know exactly how to time things appropriately, especially here in Greater Philadelphia and with the zone that we're growing in. And I really, really love that. And it's funny because as we grow and expand, we're taking a few more weddings next year, and we have a couple of other projects in the works that I'm really excited about. I am really pivoting my own personal role to be primarily growing and garden planning. We have a team of 10 designers, and I do probably less than 5% of our design work now, because I know that I'm a fine designer, but we have girls on the team that are excellent designers, and they do such exceptional work that's really where they thrive. I love seeing what they're working on. And I know that for me, my best role is really actually in the garden and running the big picture planning aspect of everything.
What has that transition been like, going from an individual person interested in growing flowers to having people working with you and working for you?
I hired people actually very early on in starting the business. And I knew that the nature of the industry and with how concentrated the schedule is for wedding design and setup days, it's virtually impossible for florists to do it completely by themselves. Most florists use a team of freelancers, but I really valued having a team that was more regular and worked together more often. I thought that it could be a lot more efficient and also a lot more stable feeling for our clients, because there wouldn't be the question of who's actually going to be showing up on your wedding day or who's actually going to be designing your flowers. And growing the team is probably the thing that I'm most proud of, because it's such a wonderful group of people, and it's so incredible to see their growth and their development and how much they love it. I'm really proud of how well we all work together, especially both in the studio and on wedding days. And we all just enjoy spending time together outside of those things too. And I feel really, really lucky for that, because I would not be able to do even a fraction of what we do if it wasn't for each and every one of them.
I think that's really inspiring. And also just tying that back to what you were talking about, the fact that you sort of started this journey during the pandemic when isolation was just sort of running rampant in everybody's life. And not only did you find out that you had this really supportive community when you broached the subject of like changing careers, but you also have built this community within the business itself. I think it's really amazing. Were there any, so when you were speaking about, growing zones and planning the garden and how to actually grow all these cut flowers, were there any resources that you found that were the most helpful when you were starting out? Like, where did you learn all of this information, if I'm assuming you didn't have a lot of it to begin with?
My actual doctoral degree is from Google and YouTube. It's really, there was no one specific resource that was pivotal. It was really a combination of probably 10 or 15 different cut flower growing books that I devoured that first year, primarily in 2021, 2022. And then any time that I heard of a new variety, which back then was constantly because it was such a new industry to me, I would look up how to grow it and get my hands on every piece of information that I possibly could. And I think one of the things that's nice is, because my background was in research, I naturally tend to just remember things pretty well. And the way that my brain categorizes this information is inherently really nice for this industry. So I feel like, as funny as it is, even though of course my background is very different, I was pretty nicely primed to knowing about these things.
Well, and I think that also ties into what you were saying before with, thinking that, feeling that your prime role is in the planning of the garden and in the growing of the garden, right? That makes sense to me as another person with a PhD. Like, that's really how our brain is sort of trained to think after a time. So
See, PhDs actually do have transferable skills.
Some.
What is something that you wish listeners knew about your field?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the answer that came to mind right away is how incredibly demanding and difficult it can be. We hear a lot of people say, oh my gosh, you have a dream job. That's what I want my retirement job to be. And I will say that I work harder now than I ever have in my life, including the week before I defended my dissertation. It's really, really challenging. Both the gardening aspect, especially at a certain scale, but also the business administration side of things, the marketing, because of course without that and without sales, there's no business, finance, accounting, HR with payroll. And then of course the actual wedding days themselves are very, very long. A lot of our wedding days I'm personally working 14 to 18 hours. And our team is on site for a long time as well. We're in the studio for long hours. And I think it's a more challenging field than people maybe realize.
That's a really important reminder, I think, for people that there is so much labor required to make something look beautiful. And right, a big part of it is to kind of, I always think about how we met you on the day of the wedding and how you had to set everything up, but that people otherwise at the wedding didn't see you. And so in some ways that, you know, they get to see the beautiful flowers, but there was months and months and months of work that went into that. So I'm really glad that you brought that up.
For every wedding, for kind of our average, if you will, wedding, there's typically about 20 to 40 hours of studio work among the team that happens after about 8 to 10 sourcing and harvesting hours. And then day of, I'm almost always in the studio by 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and then with the understanding that we get the van loaded by about 7 or 8 a.m., I go home and I hang out with my kiddos for a couple of hours when they wake up. We go set up typically around 1 p.m. on average. We're on site until about 6, and then we return around 10 or 11 whenever the reception's over. So most wedding days, I'm awake from about 3 or 4 a.m. until about midnight or so. And that's pretty common. That's unfortunately kind of a universal experience among studio florists on wedding days.
Yeah, it's super intense.
I was also going to say sorry.
No, but we love, and that's the funny thing, right? Is that it's a lot of work, but like you really never hear us complain. Like we're excited to be doing it. We're happy to be there and be a part of it. I just think it's a tremendous misunderstanding of this is some like relaxing retirement job. Like it's tricky. It can be pretty intense sometimes.
I was thinking, how do you deal with weather issues? Because I remember there was one year that there was, I remember it being either really dry or really cold. And, you know, you're in some ways very dependent on Mother Nature. How do you deal with that uncertainty?
Absolutely. It's a really, really great question because it is so challenging. From a gardening perspective, because there's really two ways to look at it. There's the wedding day weather issues, which are typically easier to manage because we have clear backup plans. And then there's the gardening climate issues that really affect our crop and our product. And typically there's not a whole lot of control that can go into it. So the backup plan in general is to have to source from ideally other regional flower farmers that are having a better year, able to grow certain things a little bit better, or sourcing from non-local wholesalers if need be. If we have some sort of disaster and the flowers that we intended for a wedding are wiped out, that's of course not acceptable. We have to be able to produce something beautiful for our brides and grooms that we're working with. And so we will use wholesale flowers that are not local when need be. Thankfully, that's relatively rare. The biggest time of year that we struggle with is April and October, because April is highly dependent on what the weather is like with the first flowers coming in. So sometimes in early April, we have a lot of flowers. Sometimes we don't. And then in October, when we have our first frost, if we get an early first frost and we've had weddings planned after that, that can get really challenging too. We're really transparent with our couples when they book with us that, you know, if they're getting married October 12th, that more likely than not, we should be okay, but there's always a chance. And that can be challenging. Now, when we have issues like not having enough rain during the season, certainly, you know, we're watering the plants more often, but there's issues where sometimes the wells go dry because we have that little rain. So last fall, actually around the time of your wedding day, last fall, we went, I want to say 3 to 4 full months without any measurable rain in Greater Philadelphia. It may have been 4 or 5 months. And that was tremendously challenging, especially because not only was it affecting the fall flowers, it was also affecting the plantings for the following spring too. It really has a ripple effect. And we just do what we can and hope for the best. But that's why some years are absolutely better or worse than others.
Yeah, trust us, we felt for you.
Yeah.
Because we knew that there was actually quite a issue with the rain. That said, one of the reasons why we were really drawn to you when we were thinking about our wedding florals was the fact that you are locally grown and you have a kind of very distinct approach, I think, and style. And so can you talk a little bit more about how you came up with the style and what went into building the look and distinguishing yourself, right, from all the other florists out there?
Sure. So the style that we have adapted, which is kind of an organic, textural, sort of whimsical feel typically, though we have some flexibility in certain weddings, we pull different styles in. But it's a direct reflection on our values and really what I hope our company stands for. So when I was learning about how to design flowers, I sought out mentorships and trainings from 3 top kind of nationally, internationally recognized designers in New York City and Palm Beach, Florida. And all 3 of them I chose specifically because they were known for using sustainable design mechanics and locally grown flowers, which is really, really different than how floral design is taught in a more traditional setting. And they tend to feel really dated. They use imported flowers. They use a ton of floral foam. When we started developing our own style, we really pulled from some people that I admire a lot and that also shared these similar values. And I think working with locally grown flowers is a very, very different thing than working with imports, which we do have familiarity with because we'll use them in our off season. We're using them currently. But working with locally grown flowers is so special because they are so much more whimsical, dynamic. They are not bred for transportation and for an enormously long vase life, like flowers that are grown in Colombia are, for example. The flowers that are grown locally are bred for their beauty, are bred for their delicacy. And that is so evident when you get to actually work with them. But inherently, it makes the designs a lot different because it's really tricky to take all of these whimsical, playful, dainty stems and turn it into some structured ball-shaped bouquet. We just couldn't do that. And even if we could, transparently, we wouldn't want to because it just doesn't feel natural and fun, which is really what we ultimately want our wedding flowers to feel like. We have a girl on the team who's our creative director for weddings and events, Morgan. We have a stylist on our team, Eliana. They're both exceptional designers. And I very much lean our brand, if you will, into what they naturally gravitate towards in terms of design, because they're really the backbone of a lot of what we put out.
Well, and one of the things that really drew me to you was just the ethos of sustainability, right? You mentioned, the fact that you don't use flower foam or you reduce the amount of flower foam that you use. Also the fact that you donate flowers. Can you talk a little bit about the process of donating flowers after a wedding and how that idea kind of came to fruition?
Sure. So the day after my own wedding, our florist gave us all of the flowers. We quite literally filled my husband's entire truck bed and then some with flowers. And the day after my own wedding, on a day that most people would be like resting and relaxing on the couch, rightfully so, I was repurposing them all into small vases to donate to the local nursing home, which ironically is one of the nursing homes that we very regularly donate to now. This was back in 2017, years before I entered the industry. But it was so important to me because I had absolutely no use for all of these flowers. And when thinking about the type of company that I wanted to have, especially once I realized that this was going to be more of a legitimate career moving forward, I realized that I wouldn't feel comfortable with the size and the scale of the jobs that we were taking and the weddings that we were taking if I didn't feel like there was some completed life cycle to the flowers. I hated the idea of them going into the trash. And the reality is a lot of our flowers do go into the compost because if they don't have at least a couple more days of vase life in them, we don't donate them because we want the people to be able to enjoy them for at least a couple of days. But what we do at the end of the weddings is we collect all of the flowers that the couple wishes to donate. Sometimes they wish to donate a small portion. Sometimes they wish to donate all of them. And then the following morning, it's either myself and some of the girls on the team or a team of volunteers comes in. We take the larger pieces and we break them down into what we'll call bedside table arrangements. So it's something that's a little bit more fitting for someone who might be at a nursing home, for example, or we donate to women's shelters, cancer facilities, hospitals. And it's a really, really nice thing that we do. It's one of the best possible ways to spend the day after a wedding because it just feels so nice to be a part of it. And I'm really fortunate because I'm oftentimes the one who's personally delivering the flowers. So I get to see just how much of an impact it makes on the recipients. It's one of my favorite things that we do.
Yeah, and in some ways it kind of links back to your background in having worked in hospitals, right? There's kind of this healthcare component, which is, maybe not something that you expected.
Absolutely. Everybody can use a little bit more joy. There's a way of communicating love and kindness through flowers that words can't really say. And what's so touching to me, I'm going to almost like tear up just thinking about this. What's so touching to me is when I get to deliver them to a hospital or a nursing home. And there's a little card that we give now that says that the flowers have been donated from the couple's name and just a little bit about what they did. The people are so touched because they know that there's this couple out there who wish to give their flowers away to them, right? And what a nice, special thing. And it's also really nice for our couples because they don't want their flowers to go to waste. And it's nice for them to know the day after their wedding that they got a second life and that someone is still getting to enjoy them.
Yeah, that's so lovely. And one of the things you were just saying reminded me of, I remember when we told people that we had just gotten married, the number of strangers who are so happy for you is just really endearing. I didn't expect that. And it was people would congratulate us. People it was really interesting. It was we don't even know them, but people are so happy to see somebody get married or find their person.
It's beautiful. And that's such a nice thing to hear you say because I am surrounded, of course, by weddings in the wedding industry all day, every day. And sometimes it can feel like a really challenging and competitive and aesthetically driven industry. And invariably it is. But that's exactly it. What you said is it's so special and joyful and beautiful. And everybody is so excited to just be a part of knowing that just knowing that you had a recent wedding, right? People love hearing that and knowing about that. It's just the most beautiful thing. I love that.
Yeah. And of course, I think we were in Philly and it's I don't know, it just felt really magical. It's everybody in Philly was happy for us and it was really lovely.
How have you surprised yourself throughout this process?
Yeah, there have been a lot of surprises. I think one of the things that's most noteworthy, and I was just talking about this with a friend the other day, is how I feel a lot more professionally confident and secure in myself than I ever did. And I remember when I was in graduate school, not ever feeling like I was great at what I was doing. And I almost needed to have another project or another career interest or another passion on the side to mentally kind of hedge to myself all right, well, you might not be great at being a clinician in this specific industry, but at least you are also, running a marathon or whatever it might have been. And I don't have that pull anymore. I am very confident to say that I am all in on what I'm doing and that I am trying my best every day and that I'm bringing 100% of my energy every day to it. And I'm certainly far from perfect and I have so much to learn and so many areas to grow in. But I feel really confident for the first time ever saying that this is what I'm doing. I am trying my best. This is me at 100%. And I feel okay saying that.
No, that's awesome. And I think you have lots of, good reasons for feeling that way. It's been, as we've been really inspired by your transition and making this new career really work for you.
Do you have any aspirations or goals you're still working towards for your company? Where do you see yourself taking this into the future?
Sure. So we have a couple of special projects in the works that I'm really looking forward to, but also looking towards the next couple of years. We're looking to grow a little bit in terms of the number and the size of the weddings that we're taking on each year. But I'm also really cautious to do so at a responsible and slow pace to ensure that we're still able to give our couples the attention that they deserve. And so a big part really of where I hope and think that our growth is going to come from in 2026, 2027, 2028 is really more in terms of education and classes and mentorships. So we're starting more of a program to support people to grow their own flowers and to learn how to grow and design their flowers in a way that's pretty consistent with how we do things. And we've been fortunate to have some really fantastic students over the last year or two, and really just excited to grow, no pun intended, that part of things so that hopefully local and thoughtfully grown flowers can reach even more and more couples.
So what would you tell our listeners who might be thinking about making a major pivot?
Sure. And I think everybody's situation, of course, is a little bit different. But if there is we'll say, financial safety net there, I think that at least dipping your toe in the water is something that you owe to yourself. Because otherwise, it's something that you will always look back on and wonder what if. And the level of the pivot can vary a lot, right? Maybe it's something that's just more of a hobby, or it becomes a passion project that you slightly monetize, but you kind of keep your 9 to 5, if you will. And then I think based on that feedback from people in the beginning, it's pretty easy, especially those first couple months of dipping your toe in the water, to know if there's a real market for whatever it is that you're looking to create and grow. And if there is, I really think people owe it to themselves to try.
I think that's great advice. I really like that.
Yeah, me too. So before we move to our rapid fire questions, I want to make sure that people know where to find you.
Yeah, where can people find you and your work?
Sure. So our website is waverlyflowerco.com. Our Instagram is at Waverly Flower Co. And I have been told by all of the Gen Zs on our team that we should get TikTok, but we don't have it yet. So maybe by the time that this airs, we will also be on TikTok. And I'm sure that we will have the same handle there too.
No, that's great. I don't have TikTok, never downloaded it. And so, but I'm sure that, I can see people really leaning in on the gardening tips.
So we'd like to close out the interview with just a few last quick rapid fire questions. So these tend to be quick questions and quick answers. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Most challenging flower to grow?
Lisianthus or Delphinium.
What is your favorite flower?
Probably sweet peas.
Name one tool you use that you are unreasonably and emotionally attached to.
A butter knife. If any flower farmer does not have at least 3 butter knives in their tool belt at all times, I would question them.
Wait, you have to explain. What do you use the butter knife for?
Yeah, so everything. We use it to cut things, which is completely silly. We should not. But it's really to scoop things out of the ground. So if we're weeding or if we're digging something up, if we are pushing something into the ground, it is used for so many things.
I learned something new today.
What would be the ultimate gift to buy someone who is into gardening or growing flowers specifically?
Oh, I love that. I think for myself, always garden gloves are fantastic. Even if somebody is an avid gardener and has a couple of pairs, they're always getting lost. They're always getting dirty. Garden gloves are fantastic. A really good garden tool belt is also wonderful.
Can you share a fun fact about wedding floral design?
I think people would be really surprised to know just how much chicken wire is used in wedding floristry, especially for more sustainable florists who don't use foam, which we don't. Chicken wire is used for just about everything to keep flowers in place.
I think I remember learning that at some point, either on a TV show or something, and that did surprise me, so you're right.
Yes, chicken wire and zip ties.
What is the next thing that you want to learn in your field?
I love learning more about season extension. So specifically how to grow flowers outside of the traditional growing season. and especially how to have flowers growing in like November, December, February, March. January is kind of unrealistic, but there's a lot of ways to do that. And that's something that I want to learn more about.
And finally, do you have any last words of wisdom you'd like to share with our listeners?
Taking the leap. I think that it is always worth at least trying and dipping your toe in the water to see what your passion can bring you.
Thank you again so much, Alanna, for coming on to Two Trick Pony podcast. We're really looking forward to this conversation. We're really, really happy that you were able to come on.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that we got to hear more about your journey. I was always curious, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you both so much for having me today. It's been such an honor.
Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in this week. We will be back for our next episode in 2 weeks.
If you want to get in touch with us, or if you know a two-trick pony who would be a great fit for the show, please let us know by email at twotrickponypodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at twotrickponypodcast. Those are both with the number 2.
And if you liked this podcast, please rate us and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.